The power of a woman who listens to God. There is a sacred strength in a woman who dares to quiet the world around her, so she can hear the voice of God within. She is not swayed by appearances, nor is she moved by the chaos that often surrounds her. While others are running, reacting, and reaching for validation, she retreats into the secret place of the Most High, into the silence where divine instruction is whispered. This woman knows that true power isn't loud. It isn't showy. It doesn't need a platform or applause. True power is found in stillness, in trust, in obedience to the unseen. When she listens to God, she receives vision. When she listens, she's no longer guessing, she's guided. She no longer fears the unknown because she's anchored in divine knowing. Her steps may look ordinary, but they are ordered. Her voice may be gentle, but it carries authority. She may walk quietly, but heavens shift when she moves. The power of a woman who listens to God is not just in what she hears, it's in what she becomes. She becomes the answer to her own prayer. She becomes light in darkness. She becomes a force that nothing can stop, not because she pushes, but because she aligns. The world may overlook her, but God anoints her, and through her surrender, nations are changed, families are restored, and destinies are unlocked. For when a woman listens to God, she becomes unstoppable. Listening is the doorway to divine instruction. There is a secret power available to every woman, but only those who are willing to go within will ever discover it. The world shouts its distractions. Society teaches her to seek answers outside of herself in relationships, achievements, opinions, and even religious rituals performed without revelation. But the woman who listens to God chooses the narrow path of stillness. She knows that the voice of God is not found in the thunder or the earthquake, but in the still small voice that speaks to her soul. To listen, she must first unlearn the noise. She must detach from the addiction to validation and lean into the discomfort of silence. In that sacred silence, she becomes available, not just physically, but spiritually. She becomes receptive to divine instruction, not as a passive listener, but as a conscious receiver of truth. This truth doesn't scream. It doesn't plead. It reveals itself to those willing to wait, and in this waiting the woman is transformed. She doesn't just hear words, she experiences impressions, she feels nudges, she senses shifts within herself that begin to mirror the mind of God. What she receives in these moments is not merely for inspiration, it is for activation. She begins to see how every divine whisper is an invitation to become. It may come as a gentle warning, a quiet conviction, a sudden flash of insight, or a soft reminder of who she truly is. But whatever the form, she no longer questions its origin, because she has learned to recognize the frequency of heaven. It isn't panic, it isn't fear, it is peace, and peace becomes her compass. She doesn't need the full map because she walks by revelation, not by sight. She obeys even when it doesn't make sense, because she understands that divine logic often looks like foolishness to the world, and yet, every time she follows that inner voice, something supernatural aligns. Doors open without knocking, battles are won without fighting, people are drawn to her without her trying to impress. This is not coincidence, this is consequence, the inevitable result of a woman who listens to God. She no longer debates with herself. She no longer argues with the voice. She recognizes that her first thought, when it is infused with peace, love, and inner knowing, is often God speaking through her. Listening becomes her weapon. It becomes her strategy. It becomes her protection. She avoids chaos not because she fights it, but because she hears in advance when to leave, when to pause, when to stay still. The world calls it intuition. She calls it divine direction. And because she listens, she gains access to mysteries that others miss. She receives visions that are ahead of her time. She walks with assurance while others are still seeking answers. She doesn't just hear from God. She lives from what she hears. This is why she doesn't chase, she attracts. This is why she doesn't beg, she aligns. The voice of God doesn't flatter. It doesn't cater to ego. It calls her higher. It convicts her when she's veering off course. It comforts her when she feels weary. It reassures her when everything outside says panic, and still she listens. She may be misunderstood. She may be mocked, but she knows that clarity always comes to the one who is quiet enough to receive it. She understands that divine instruction is not always loud, but it is always precise. One word from God can replace 1,000 hours of planning. One whisper in the night can cancel years of confusion. One divine idea, birthed in silence, can produce a harvest no storm can destroy. So she makes it her lifestyle, not a moment but a way of being. She listens while washing dishes. She listens while walking. She listens in prayer, not just to speak but to commune. She's not in a rush because she knows that power lies in presence. In listening, she builds intimacy with her Creator. She doesn't rely solely on what she was taught about God. She experiences God for herself, and as she listens, her identity is affirmed. No longer does she need to ask the world who she is. The voice within reminds her, chosen, beloved, purposed, powerful. And from this inner knowledge she moves. She doesn't perform to earn worth. She flows from a place of already being enough. Her life becomes a living testimony, not because of what she says, but because of the peace she carries, the wisdom she lives, and the grace that follows her. Others may ask, "How did you know?" And her answer will be simple, "I listened." The power of a woman who listens to God is unmatched because it is not built on human effort. It is built on divine alignment. She understands that her assignment on earth cannot be fulfilled by noise. It requires guidance that only comes from the source. So she keeps her ears tuned and her heart open. She waits, not with impatience, but with expectancy. For she knows that the one who listens to God lacks nothing, and in listening she is led, not just to blessings, but to become a blessing, not just to answers, but to wisdom, not just to revelation, but to transformation. For when a woman listens to God, she doesn't just survive, she reigns. Obedience to the inner voice reshapes reality. There is a quiet revolution that begins inside a woman the moment she stops merely acknowledging the voice of God and begins obeying it. Obedience is not blind submission. It is enlightened trust. It is a powerful agreement with the divine instructions whispered within. The woman who walks in obedience to the inner voice is not controlled by circumstances. She controls circumstances by aligning with the invisible truth. When God speaks to her in the depth of her being, whether through a subtle nudge, a persistent thought, or a vision in the quiet hours, she no longer delays. She understands that delayed obedience is still disobedience, and disobedience disconnects her from the divine rhythm of her life. So she yields, not from fear, but from revelation. She knows that the voice guiding her is not random, it is sacred. It is the same voice that spoke creation into existence, and when she follows it, she participates in creation herself. Her obedience becomes the soil where miracles grow. It becomes the bridge between what is and what shall be. She no longer waits for confirmation from people because she has learned to trust the confirmation of peace. She doesn't ask for permission to act on divine instruction. She moves with boldness born from the stillness of her inner sanctuary, and every time she obeys, the reality around her begins to shift. Doors that were shut begin to open. People who were against her suddenly fall away, and those assigned to bless her are drawn without effort. She no longer operates by logic alone, but by revelation. What doesn't make sense to the mind makes perfect sense to the spirit. When God tells her to leave, she leaves, even if everything looks perfect on the outside. When God tells her to speak, she speaks, even if her voice shakes. When he tells her to stay, she stays, even when everything inside her wants to run. This obedience is not weakness, it is divine strength. It is a sign of a woman who has matured spiritually, one who trusts that the one who speaks within her knows more than she can ever calculate. This kind of obedience causes her to step out of old cycles. It breaks the chains of generational dysfunction. It closes the door on trauma and opens the gates to legacy. She realizes that the future is not something she waits for. It's something she walks into through her choices. And her choices are now governed by the voice of God. She doesn't follow trends. She follows truth. She doesn't consult fear. She consults the Spirit. And because of this, she becomes a living exception. While others wonder why they're stuck, she keeps rising. While others talk about dreams, she builds them in silence. She does not need applause because obedience is its own reward. She has tasted the fruit of following divine direction, and nothing else satisfies her soul. Her life becomes a series of divine appointments. She is in the right place at the right time. Her words carry weight because they are rooted in revelation, not emotion. Her presence shifts atmospheres, not because she's trying to be powerful, but because she's aligned with power. This kind of obedience demands sacrifice. It requires her to release control, to let go of timelines, and to trust when nothing is visible yet. But she does it again and again, because she knows that what she surrenders always returns multiplied. Her obedience is not religious, it is relational. It flows from intimacy, from knowing the character of the one who speaks to her. She has history with God. She remembers the time she obeyed and was spared. She recalls when she listened and was promoted. She cherishes the moments when her obedience saved her from heartbreak, from deception, from loss, and so she obeys without hesitation. This kind of obedience turns her into a force of divine manifestation. She becomes a portal through which heaven touches earth. Her life becomes a testimony of what happens when a woman says yes to the voice within. She no longer tries to convince others, she lets the fruit speak. Her peace is unshakable, her confidence is unwavering, her joy is rooted not in outcomes but in alignment. She understands that every time she obeys, she invites God to intervene. Every yes becomes a seed. Every act of obedience releases favor, and even when it costs her comfort, she knows it births her calling. The woman who obeys doesn't need to see the whole staircase. She takes the first step and trusts that the rest will be revealed. This is how she moves mountains. This is how she heals generations. This is how she builds without blueprints, loves without limits, and believes without evidence. Obedience becomes her signature, and transformation becomes her story. She lives in rhythm with eternity. She is no longer limited by the natural because her obedience unlocks the supernatural. She becomes the evidence of divine partnership. Her life says, God still speaks and I still obey, and for that she walks in realms others only pray about. She is trusted with secrets. She is entrusted with missions. She becomes a vessel of divine order in a world full of confusion. She is not loud, but she is legendary, not flashy but favored, not perfect but positioned. Because obedience has positioned her, she has learned that obedience is the language of love, the path of power, and the gateway to purpose. And because she chooses to follow the voice within again and again, she reshapes reality everywhere she goes. Her imagination becomes her weapon of faith. There is a realm within every woman that is more powerful than any external circumstance. She will ever face her imagination. But this is not the imagination of fantasy or escapism. It is sacred territory, the inner chamber where divine truths are planted and cultivated into form. The woman who listens to God eventually discovers that imagination is not a childish thing to be dismissed, but a spiritual faculty to be refined and honored. It is in her imagination that she sees what her eyes cannot yet perceive. It is in that secret place that God speaks in symbols, visions, and quiet revelations, forming blueprints of what is to come. This woman does not take her thoughts lightly anymore. She has learned that her inner world is more real, more influential, and more creative than anything outside her. She no longer allows worry to dwell unchecked in her mind, for she knows that to imagine fear is to give it energy. Instead, she chooses to see what God has promised, to feel the joy before it arrives, to walk in the fulfillment before it manifests, to live as if the answer has already come. That is faith. Faith is not begging or pleading, it is seeing with conviction, and imagination becomes her weapon of faith, the lens through which she shapes her world. While others wait for a sign, she closes her eyes and creates the vision. She does not wait for the external to change before she shifts her belief. She has mastered the art of inner alignment. She imagines herself healed and her body begins to respond. She imagines herself free and chains start to break. She imagines herself walking through open doors and opportunities begin to call her name. Her imagination is not random, it is strategic. It is the paintbrush with which she partners with the divine to craft a reality that reflects heaven's intention for her life. She understands that every image she holds consistently with faith, every scene she plays on repeat in her inner screen, is a seed sown in the soil of the Spirit. That seed, watered by emotion and nurtured by trust, must grow. This is not wishful thinking. It is divine law. As she thinks, so she becomes. As she imagines, so she creates. And so she guards her imagination fiercely. She does not dwell on betrayal, for she knows it will reproduce more wounds. She does not meditate on failure, for she refuses to prophesy disappointment. Instead, she rehearses success. She visualizes peace. She embodies strength. In her inner world, she is already whole, already thriving, already walking in divine purpose. And that inner vision becomes her compass, guiding her choices, fueling her courage, anchoring her when storms arise. When fear whispers lies, she closes her eyes and sees the truth again. She returns to the vision and lets it correct her course. Others may call it delusion, but she calls it discipline, the discipline to believe before seeing, to build inwardly before building outwardly. Her imagination becomes her sanctuary, the place where she meets with God, where she receives visions too great to explain, and yet too real to deny. She holds them like a woman pregnant with promise. She knows that the world may not yet understand, but that does not matter. Her job is not to convince, her job is to carry, and she carries it through imagination. Her faith is not surface level, it is embedded in every thought, every image, every inner dialogue she entertains. She speaks not from current reality, but from the future she has already seen within. She doesn't say if, she says when. She doesn't say maybe, she says it is done. Her declarations flow from vision, not from circumstance. That is why her words have power. That is why her prayers are effective. That is why her atmosphere shifts when she walks in, because she lives from a different dimension. Her imagination is no longer a battleground for fear. It is a greenhouse for miracles. She tends to it daily. She weeds out doubt. She removes old narratives. She replaces lies with truth. She doesn't just hope for better. She imagines it, feels it, thanks God for it in advance. And because she does, her outer world begins to reflect her inner one. Opportunities come not by accident, but by alignment. Resources appear not because of luck, but because she became the version of herself that they were meant to meet. People sense something different about her, not because she boasts, but because she believes. Her belief is unshakable because it is not built on sight, but on vision. She knows what she saw. She knows what God showed her, and she refuses to let go of it. Even when time delays, even when challenges come, even when others walk away. Her imagination sustains her, it feeds her faith, it restores her when she is weary. It reminds her that God did not just give her dreams, He gave her the ability to create them in partnership with Him. Every moment she spends visualizing, praying, affirming, and aligning her thoughts is an act of spiritual warfare. She is not fighting with fists, but with focus. She is not swinging with words, but with images. And those images are full of power, full of life, full of truth. She has learned the secret. Whatever she consistently imagines in faith must eventually become her experience. So she imagines boldly. She dreams freely. She believes deeply. Her imagination becomes the birthplace of transformation. She is no longer a prisoner to what is, she is a midwife to what shall be, and through the power of her imagination, she writes a new story, one of freedom, of favor, of fulfillment. For the woman who listens to God, imagination is not just a gift, it is her greatest weapon. And when used in faith, nothing can stop what she envisions from coming to pass. She becomes the living word in motion. There comes a divine shift in a woman's life when she no longer simply reads the word, hears the word, or speaks the word, but becomes the word. She transforms into the living expression of divine truth, carrying the essence of God's voice in every action, every decision, every breath. This transformation doesn't come from religious striving or outward rituals. It emerges from deep, sacred listening and inner surrender. She no longer separates her life from the truth she believes. She becomes the embodiment of it. When the word says she is fearfully and wonderfully made, she walks in beauty and reverence toward herself. When the Word declares she is more than a conqueror, she does not shrink in the face of adversity, she stands in victory even before the battle begins. Her entire being begins to mirror heaven's blueprint. The thoughts she allows, the emotions she fosters, the choices she makes all flow from a higher consciousness, not out of obligation, but from identity. She is not trying to live holy, she is holy, not by effort, but by embodiment. The word is no longer a concept she tries to apply, it is a reality she lives from. She doesn't need to force it. It becomes natural because it is who she is. She realizes that God's Word is not just a book on her shelf, but a divine frequency flowing through her spirit. She aligns with it not to perform, but to awaken. As she listens to God, she becomes aware that she is not just receiving instructions, she is being shaped, molded, and breathed into by the living breath of the divine. Her life becomes a walking scripture, not by quoting verses, but by manifesting the fruit of those verses: peace, love, patience, joy, wisdom, strength. She no longer needs to explain who she is, her presence explains it for her. She becomes a testimony without speaking a word. Her silence speaks volumes, her decisions echo revelation, her resilience preaches the sermon. She no longer separates the sacred from the everyday. Washing dishes, raising children, building a business, it's all worship, because she moves with divine intention. Every room she enters becomes a temple because she carries the Word within her. She has become the ark, the dwelling place of presence. When others worry, she stands still. When others rush, she walks with grace. When others panic, she remembers. She remembers what God said, and that memory anchors her deeper than the storm could ever shake. She is unbothered by delay because the Word has already shown her the ending. She is not confused when people leave because the Word revealed they were never part of the promise. She doesn't need everything around her to be perfect, she only needs to remain in alignment with the Word that lives inside her. That Word is not theory to her, it is her daily bread. It is what she eats in silence, what she drinks in stillness, what she speaks over her life when no one else is around. And as she continues to listen to God, the Word deepens. It becomes revelation. It becomes sight. She begins to see through spiritual eyes. She recognizes what others cannot: the timing, the warning, the door, the provision. She walks with supernatural clarity, not because she's lucky, but because she's anchored in divine truth. Her emotions no longer rule her. She doesn't act from flesh, she responds from spirit. She has been refined by fire, shaped by storms, and purified by obedience. Through every trial the Word in her grew stronger, louder, more alive. And now it governs her. It rules her mind, disciplines her tongue, guides her hands. She is no longer tempted to conform to what the world says she should be. She has heard what God says she already is. She is the light set on a hill. She is the salt of the earth. She is chosen, appointed, beloved. She doesn't say these things for affirmation. She says them because she knows them. She knows them because she became them. And now her life is proof. Her existence becomes prophecy fulfilled. People who encounter her don't just see a woman, they feel an atmosphere. They experience peace that makes no sense. They receive wisdom that cuts through confusion. They hear truth that pierces their soul, even if she doesn't preach it. Because when she speaks, the Word speaks through her. When she walks, the Word walks in her steps. She is in sync with something eternal. Her faith is not merely intellectual, it is cellular. It lives in her bones, her rhythm, her breath. Even in seasons of silence, she is still growing. Even in waiting, she is still moving. Even in pain, she is still prophesying. Why? Because the Word does not return void, and she is the evidence. She is the manifestation of what God spoke long before she was formed. Her life is not random, it is authored. Every chapter, every season, every breakthrough, every heartbreak, all of it written with precision, with purpose. And she trusts the author, so she doesn't resist the process. She embraces it, knowing that even when it's hard, it's holy. Even when it's delayed, it's divine. Even when it's lonely, it's leading her somewhere sacred. She has become the Word in motion, a living, breathing reminder that what God speaks must come to pass. She walks with a quiet power, a gentle fire, a relentless grace, not because she is striving, but because she is surrendered. She is not perfect, but she is present. She is not flawless, but she is faithful. And that faithfulness to listen, to obey, to believe, to embody, that is what made her powerful. That is what turned her life into a mirror of divine truth. She doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. Her fruit proves it all. Her peace is the evidence. Her transformation is the testimony. Her endurance is the signature of the Spirit upon her. She is the Word alive, and wherever she goes, things shift. Not because she forces it, but because she carries something eternal, and that, more than anything, is the power of a woman who listens to God. Her stillness commands spiritual authority. There is a divine paradox hidden in the spirit of a woman who truly listens to God. She does not raise her voice, yet heavens move on her behalf. She does not announce her authority, yet it is felt in every room she enters. She does not chase, strive, or push, because she has discovered a deeper power, stillness. The world has taught her that power must be loud, busy, visible. But God has taught her that power is found in rest, in trust, in quiet knowing. Her stillness is not laziness, it is spiritual warfare won in silence. It is the posture of one who knows who she is and who she belongs to. She does not panic when circumstances change, because her peace does not come from conditions, it comes from communion. In her stillness she communes with the divine. She listens more than she speaks, because she understands that divine strategy is whispered, not shouted. She does not beg God for answers, she receives them in silence. She does not plead for miracles, she prepares for them. While others run after solutions, she sits and receives revelation. Her stillness is not a lack of movement. It is the most powerful movement of all, alignment. In that alignment, she commands what others strive to control. She speaks less but sees more. She does less but achieves more. Her stillness is not passive, it is prophetic. It positions her to hear what others miss. It protects her from unnecessary battles. It preserves her energy for what truly matters. She no longer reacts to every storm because she knows the storm has no authority over a woman who is anchored. Anchored in what? In the voice of God, in the promise, in the unseen truth that governs everything. Her stillness says, I trust him. Her stillness says, I know it's already done. Her stillness says, I don't need to fight for what has already been spoken. She no longer argues with people, because she understands her war is not with flesh and blood. She no longer justifies herself, because the Spirit justifies her. She doesn't chase validation, because she has heard the only voice that matters say, you are mine. And in that stillness she gains clarity. She hears solutions before the problem even speaks. She senses shifts before others know change is coming. She discerns truth beneath deception. This is why the enemy fears her silence, because it is not empty, it is full of power. It is full of vision, revelation, and unshakable peace. She understands the weight of her presence. She doesn't need to prove anything. She walks into a room, and her spirit speaks first. She may say little, but her energy declares victory. Her peace makes chaos uncomfortable. Her stillness unsettles those who operate in confusion, not because she tries to intimidate, but because she carries the atmosphere of heaven. She doesn't perform for love. She knows she is loved. She doesn't push for position. She trusts divine timing, and this posture gives her authority not even titles can offer. People listen when she speaks because her words come from depth. They carry conviction because they are not birthed in reaction but in reflection. They carry weight because they are not emotional impulses but divine utterances. She does not waste words. She is intentional, measured, present. Her stillness gives her a commanding presence, not by force, but by frequency. She vibrates at the level of divine alignment. She has let go of the need to prove, persuade, or please. She has entered into rest, and from that rest she reigns. Stillness has made her wise. She no longer rushes into decisions. She waits for peace, for confirmation, for clarity, and when she moves in power. Every step she takes is ordained. Every action is rooted in discernment. She is not led by her emotions. She is led by the Spirit. And the Spirit speaks in stillness. She has made peace her home, not her vacation. She has built her life on trust, not control. She has trained herself to sit before she speaks, to pause before she acts, to wait before she responds. And because of this, she walks in favor, she walks in revelation, She walks in divine appointments that others miss in their frantic searching. Her stillness commands spiritual authority because it is proof of her maturity. She has graduated from needing to see in order to believe. She believes, therefore she sees. She no longer chases what belongs to her. She knows that what is hers will be magnetized to her by divine law. She is not afraid of silence because she has learned that silence is where the Spirit breathes. She is not afraid of being overlooked because she knows God sees her, and in that divine seeing, all things are made to work for her good. Her stillness has taught her to wait without whining, to trust without timelines, to surrender without fear. She has learned to rest in the presence of her enemies, to feast in the presence of lack, to smile in the face of uncertainty. Not because she is numb, but because she is deeply aware of who holds her. She doesn't shout declarations, she lives them. She doesn't perform faith, she becomes it, and the universe responds. God honors her stillness by sending clarity, by opening doors, by shifting seasons in her favor. She doesn't need to manipulate outcomes, she allows them to unfold. She no longer carries anxiety about the future because she knows who goes before her. Her stillness becomes her authority, its silence is doubt. It disarms fear, it dismantles confusion. Her quiet becomes louder than the noise, her rest becomes a weapon, her peace becomes her power. She knows that when she is still, she hears, when she is still, she sees. When she is still, she wins. The woman who listens to God doesn't fight battles the same way others do. She wins in stillness, she reigns in silence, and she moves with the confidence of one who knows. God is with her, and that is enough.